Hi, my name is Laly Mille. I'm a mixed media artist from France and I'm so excited to be part of Lifebook. I love to paint on canvas or in my art journal, and I also like to do dimensional art like weavings and artist books. But whatever I do, I really love the process to be fun and meaningful. What is most important to me as an artist is really to connect to my truth, to connect to my soul, my creativity, my little spark within, and create something from there. It's always a little magical when you dive into your inner world and you create something real and beautiful in the outer physical world. Making art always makes me feel better, and not just when I express my emotions spontaneously, but also when I create with a deliberate intention and infuse it in my work. For instance, I might create a journal page around peace, and little by little, as I create, I will feel more peaceful. I guess one of the things that I most struggle with is procrastination, and I know it's the case for many artists. And it's just the getting started part. You know, the first step is always the hardest. And I find that working in layers, which is what I love about mixed media, is really helpful to me, because I can add a piece of collage here and add a dash of paint there, and I can work in little pockets of time. It's not always easy to allow ourselves this creative time and really do it. But I also find that working in my art journal or working on small artworks, mini pieces, and working in a series, all of those things really help me actually do it. Whether you're a beginner or not, I believe that one of the most important things is to really find what works for you, to find what resonates with you intuitively, what you feel comfortable with, what you feel excited about, and really focus on that. Take the time to know yourself and to tune in and feel what really resonates with you, and just let go of the rest. There are no shoulds and shouldn'ts, and you have all the magic you will ever need inside of you. And to put this into practice, one thing that I would recommend also is to really get to know your tools and know your supplies really well, because they are your magic ones and they are your friends in the studio. So take the time and experiment and make them your own. To this aim, I really encourage you to sign up for my free gift, which is a video workshop all about mixed media art supplies. We go over all the basics and much more, and also plenty of creative tips. So go to lalymille.com/supplies to sign up, and I hope to see you there. So let's get started. All right, I hope you're ready to get messy. And first thing that I want to show you is this bit of paper here, because I want to show you what I mean by poetic papers. Papers that have a poetic quality, sometimes a bit moody like this, or a vintage feel, something that evokes an emotion or maybe a memory. So this one here is just a book page from a book about butterflies and insects. And I just added some India ink and some bubble wrap with white gesso here. And I just made random marks, and I was really doing something else at the same time, and it was just catching my leftovers, but I really like how it turned out, and now I could really imagine myself using this bit of paper or parts of it into a page in my journal, for instance, or a painting. Now this other sheet of paper has some rust marks on it. And I really love the effects here. And with rust marks, which we're going to do today around the end of the session, we can get plenty of different effects, which is really fun. So these poetic papers, they happen very organically and unexpectedly in my process. I always have some leftovers that I can then work with, but today we're going to do it intentionally. Now, the other thing I want to tell you is that today I have a bit of a flu, so my voice may get a little weird. And we're also, as I'm filming this, in the middle of a heat wave in the summer. So to me, it was a day when I was feeling like, I didn't want to paint anything. I didn't want to focus really on something, on making something that would demand a lot of energy from me. But this kind of work is perfect for those moments when you feel a little off or uninspired, because I know it's going to kickstart my creativity again. And the bonus is that at the end of maybe an hour, I'm going to end up with so much interesting material that I can use for collage in my work in months to come. So if you're up for it, I'm just going to show you the materials and then we're going to get started and get messy. Now first, papers. I have gathered plenty of different ones in neutral tones, especially when it's hot like today. I love to work with white and neutrals. It has a bit of a wintry feel, so that's something that I really enjoy. Of course, when you're going to watch that, it will probably be in a completely different season, but it doesn't matter. It's just creating something for yourself that feels good. If you want to do this with lots of color, go ahead. I have plenty of book pages, so these ones are from a book about insects and butterflies again. So this is really pretty. Of course, if you don't have anything like that, it doesn't matter. You can find some online that you can print, but it's also very easy to make your own with just a rubber stamp like this and to stamp over any kind of book page. And it's good to have a variety of papers with some browns, some whites. But if you don't have any, don't worry, because we're also going to use some really white printing paper, and I'm going to show you how to stain it to give it a nice vintage look. These are some library cards. I just picked them on the floor just when I was getting ready. And now something else that's going to be really useful is white tissue paper. The kind you find in shoe boxes, in parcels of all kinds. This is a sheet of cardstock that's left from a notebook, I think. Some brown wrapping paper, and this one is sewing pattern paper. It's still white because you can find the brown one also that's really pretty, and I'm going to stain that as well to make it look more vintage. More book pages. Oh, this is fun. This is a kind of natural fiber paper. It's not exactly mulberry paper, but that would work too. So I have a large sheet here that I might cut, and this is also natural fiber paper. This is a bit of an envelope that I kept. Some kitchen towel. This is some paper doily. And I just grabbed this at the last minute. It's a piece of magazine page and it's a very dark floral pattern. So who knows what I could do with that. So that's almost it for my papers. And the last thing is that I have a pad of draft paper, any kind of white, regular white paper. Not too thick, not too thin, will work. So that's it for the papers. Now let's talk about the different things we're going to use to stain them and customize them. There are two things I like to use to make my papers a bit vintage. First is some tea, some black tea here. You can try with many different kinds of tea and it will give you different results. So this is really English breakfast, very pigmented, very dark. And this is walnut ink in the form of granules. It's pretty much the same effects you get with instant coffee. I don't have any instant coffee here at the moment. I have that, it's going to work. Either way is fine. And then you can use any paints and inks that you like. For instance, here I have some watercolors, and these are all my neutral watercolors. Some are more red, others more greenish or purplish, but they are all muted colors. So that's one thing I'm going to use for sure. You can also use acrylic paint, acrylic ink. Like this transparent raw umber ink is really my go-to for a vintage color. This one is by Liquitex, it's really nice. Here I have some heavy body acrylics. This one is called Parchment. It's really the same color as this. You can see it's very similar. This one is a neutral gray. I'm not sure I'm going to use them all, but I just want to show you different options. And then of course some white. So this is white acrylic paint, heavy body, and this is white gesso. What else? I would also recommend having a spray bottle at the ready and also a little jar of water. A rag is always useful. And then you're going to need something to make interesting marks. So here is what I've gathered. I have some ready-made stamps. These ones are rubber stamps. These ones are clear silicone stamps. They all work. These ones are wooden block stamps. But if you don't have any of these, really no worries, because you can stamp with anything you like, anything that has texture. So this is bubble wrap, another bubble wrap with a different size of dots. This little grid is from some drywall tape. And these are pieces of wallpaper, textured wallpaper that you can get completely free at the DIY store. Just ask for samples. And you could use stencils as well. Here is a floral stencil. So this one is by Tim Holtz. These ones are by Florilege, Aladdin, and the other ones, the clear ones, I have no idea. This one that everybody asks me about is also by Florilege. And I love this one because the text is actually a poem called Aube, which means dawn, by a French poet called Arthur Rimbaud. And it's very lovely text. So when I want to add something poetic to my papers, this is definitely a good one. You could also use lots of other different mark making tools, a needle tool, a palette knife, a brayer, or even things from around the house like a fork, a knife. You might also want to gather a few pens and pencils in neutral tones as well. The ones that are permanent mean that whenever the paper gets wet, you will still see the marks or the text that you created before. If you use some that are more water soluble, then they're going to bleed when you add water on top, and this is also very good because it's going to create unexpected effects. Now, a few more fun little things. This is a box of rusty items that I have picked up from the street, from the garden, the barn, around here, and it's really easy to find some rusty bits like nails, things like that. Once you start collecting them, you will see them everywhere. So I have a few of them, and they are really fun to make rust marks on paper. A technique I'm going to show you at the end of the session, and I hope you will give it a try because it's really fun. And a little bit of coarse salt. That's really fun to add to your watercolor because it creates beautiful unexpected marks that look like little sparkly stars sometimes. Okay, we will also need some paint brushes, a large flat one like this, and a medium-sized round brush. This is nice to make marks with water. If you have a watercolor brush, that works really well too, but make sure you don't use it with acrylic. And then if you want to make a collage with all your beautiful materials in the end, you can use some matte gel medium. That's really my go-to for a collage because it's matte, so it's not going to change the texture of the paper too much. And this is some craft paper. Actually, it's from a parcel I got today. I'm using it to protect my table, but hopefully it's going to catch some paint, some marks, some unexpected effects, and in the end I can peel it off and use this as well. Something else that could be useful, especially for the rust technique, is to have a placemat like this, for instance, or a tray, something that can get wet and it's not going to dissolve under the water like this paper would, because the rust technique needs to sit really wet for a few hours. And finally, I also have set a little table, an empty table next to me, because I'm going to end up with lots of materials that I need to let dry. So you can either clear some space on the floor or have a table at the ready. So now I'm going to put the kettle on because the first technique that I want to show you is how to turn a brand new white paper like this into something that has more of a vintage feel like this. Okay, I'm going to let this cool a little bit, and I think I'm going to use a tray for this. And I'm going to put my sheet of paper here, and let's try with my brush. I'm going to dip it into the tea, even while it's hot, and start applying it. So you see it's pretty light at the moment, but if I wait longer, it's going to be darker, stronger. So it's really up to you to try it out. Let's give it a light tea color. And what I would very often do also is use the tea bag itself. I'm going to use a paper clip because that's what I have on my table. That's fine. And you can rub it straight onto the paper and it's going to give you a much stronger color. And you don't have to do it everywhere. So here I'm just rubbing in places. I think it's going to make the color more interesting. Make sure your paper is really soaked, that there isn't any white left. Now I think I also want to add some of my salt here, but I'm going to do that once I have put it on a placemat to dry safely away, because I'm going to need the tray again in a minute. Okay, it's nice and flat, and I can add a little bit of salt. The paper has already absorbed a lot of the moisture, so I'm not sure the salt is going to give me any interesting marks, but I'm just going to add some where it's still really wet and add little clusters of salt. Okay, now I can put it aside to dry. Now while I have my tray that's all wet, I'm going to try my little granules. Maybe for that I can use my sheet music that's truly vintage. I'm going to spray. And I'm going to grab just a few of my little granules, and you could use instant coffee instead. It would work just as well. And I'm going to sprinkle my page. That's already a lot. It's super pigmented. Actually, what I'm going to do is immediately use another sheet of paper, like this cardstock. I'm going to place it over it to catch a bit of the granules. Yummy, look at that. Just that is so interesting. Let's make some drips. I really like it. And I think here the salt is going to work really well. So let's try that. And really, for the salt to work, you have to let it dry fully. So sometimes I'm not patient and I try removing the salt too early, and then it just ruins it. So just be patient. But that's what's good when you're trying lots of techniques and you're making lots of different papers, is that some of them can dry while you're working on the rest. Now this has too much pigment. I went a little crazy, so why not try my kitchen towel here to absorb some of it. Ooh, it's nice. So you see, it's about trying things with no preconceived ideas and just inviting unexpected effects to show up. It's nice here because there's lots of contrast between some really dark areas like this here and some lighter shades of brown. It's very tempting to overwork it, so just as soon as you get something that's kind of nice, just let it be. Okay, now while we're working with the wet materials, I think I want to try the watercolors. The first thing I'm going to do is spread my papers on the table, and this way whenever the paint runs out of one piece of paper, it can then land on the one that's underneath. So that's always fun. So let me start with some tissue paper. Here is my paper doily. Oops, this is very fragile, so as soon as it gets wet, it's going to break, but that's fine. It's even more interesting. My beautiful wings that are already so poetic. A poem and a sheet of draft paper. And now I think I want to wet my paints first. So I'm going to add a drop of water to the ones I want to use. I have Moon Glow, which is a muted purple. I like that. This one is Lunar Blue. A bit of Raw Umber. Payne's Gray. So now what I'm going to do is use my brush to really randomly apply some paint in places. Little puddles, little marks. And I'm really holding my brush very loosely. I'm not trying to really paint the papers, just add touches of color here and there. Sometimes a bit darker with more pigment. Sometimes just a wash with a lot of water. Now how about adding some paint through the holes of the doily here? So you see, one thing leads to another, and now this is making me want to try out my stencils. So that's why it's nice to have lots of things at the ready on your table, because you never know what your next impulse is going to be. And let's try with some tea. Why not? Could mix it with the watercolor. Let's try a bit of salt here, because this is a big wet puddle. Ooh, look at that! Look at all those marks, really nice. That was completely unplanned and I love it. Let's make some more. Ooh, this is so beautiful. I love that. And you see, that's when you really start experimenting like that and you get unexpected results. They are so pretty and so fun, and it's very, very satisfying. So even if I'm not making a work of art right now, I'm making artsy materials that are so fun and so lovely to use later. And now I said I wanted to try my stencils. So first maybe I'm going to try that little grid thing, maybe with my raw umber again. Let's see what we can get, because it's super wet, so it's not going to be a sharp stencil at all. It's going to create some interesting effects maybe. Remove it and see. Ooh, nice. Let's press it here with my little brayer. Now let's try some black again. This I could use as tree branches or grasses, maybe in a landscape. Maybe try my salt again in those puddles. Sometimes the salt works and sometimes it doesn't. So it's good to try it in different places on different papers. I'm not sure my craft paper underneath is going to get much color at all because of the tissue paper, but I like the tissue paper better. So that's just another option. Now let's just make one of those book pages interesting with a butterfly or a dragonfly or something. Now I could do it with an ink pad here. I think I forgot to tell you at the beginning, but it's in the list of supplies. So these are permanent ink pads. Let's try it in black. So it dries almost instantly, and then you can use watercolor on top, which is really nice. Here it is. I didn't ink it very well, but that's fine. And I can use it on my tissue paper until there's no ink left. So that's one of them. And what if we did it with watercolor? Let's just try. Here in my palette directly. Ooh, yummy. Oh, it's much better. I love it. Let's do it again. Let's do this one with the dragonfly. So what I'm going to do is use maybe my magazine page here as a palette. So then press my stamp into that. But look at that. That is pretty. Midnight Garden with a sort of ghost print of the dragonfly. I like that. So you see, again, something unexpected. Let's add some black droplets. You see, just this here could really become the starting point of a page in my art journal. Let's try with my ink again. Now I'm feeling very tempted to tone down the text around it, so I'm going to use some of my gesso. We haven't done white yet. I think I'm going to use a silicone tool or palette knife. And now something else I'm always tempted to do whenever I have a thick coat of gesso like this is to stamp into it or scratch into it. So I'm going to do that with my bubble wrap here. Just going to press into the fresh gesso. It's going to remove some. Yummy. And then I can add this somewhere else on the page. It's so hot in the studio, it's drying super fast. So let's take a clean brush. I'm going to add some directly to my bubble wrap. The good thing when it dries really fast like that is that you can layer very quickly. And what if I added some of what's left here? But I have some paint left, so why not use it? And now that this brush has been into the gesso, I'm not going to put it back into the watercolor because it would ruin my watercolors, because gesso is acrylic. Ooh, look at that. Oh, I love that. This is so super yummy. Just in those two corners, I think. I love this sheet of paper. That was a book page. It was not very interesting, but now it's really something I could use in my art and that would inspire me. Okay, now we have some gesso, so what can we do with it? That is even more interesting and beautiful. We haven't tried the text stamps. We have done this over a book page, but if you just have any random paper, but you have a text stamp, you could create your book page really. So you can do this on any kind of paper, but I'm going to do it here on my tissue. And stamp. Maybe stamp into the gesso here. Now I have this block print that is brand new. I have never tried it before, so I'm feeling very tempted to use it. Let's do, I have those library cards. And can you see here, it's kind of embossed the flower onto my little card with the thick coat of gesso. I like that. So I'm going to let this dry as it is because I really like it. So you see, doing this kind of work is also a great way to try out any new supplies that you got and not use them straight away on some art. This way there's no pressure. And you know, I think my tissue paper is going to end up being my favorite of all the papers I made. Okay, now while this dries, I'm going to go and clean my stamp because I don't want it to get all clogged up with the gesso. And I'll be back in a moment. Okay, I've taken a break and I've made some more tea here, and now I'm ready to play with my rusty little bits here. So I'm going to show you the process once, and then I'm going to do a whole bunch of them because once you get going, it's easier to do a whole batch. I have a variety of papers, the same as before. I prefer the ones that are not too stiff, so this one we'll see, but tissue works best, and this one is pattern tissue. And those are rather flexible natural fiber papers. So what I'm going to do is choose maybe my pretty little key here, or this one I want to use with the tissue. And once you've done it a few times, you know which of your materials are working well. So I know this prints well, this as well. So my tea here is very hot. You don't need it to be as hot, but I just made it, so there it is. And I'm going to wet the paper really, really well. This one is super absorbent. So it's going to become very, very flexible, and it's going to be easy to mold it around my little key. I'm doing both sides. When you do a thick paper like that, you might need to turn it over, but for tissue you don't need to. So let's start maybe here, or you can dip it into the tea a bit. Here we are. I'm going to fold my paper over it and really, really press around the shape of the item. You can press with your brush or with your fingers. I'm going to fold it again. And on the other side. Pressing really well, and I'm going to make sure it's really, really soaking wet. See here, it's not wet enough. It shouldn't be able to come apart like that. Let's make it sticky. Okay, that's one little bundle done. Now let's do this piece of jewelry. Let's try with this natural paper here. Now let's do one with tissue. So tissue is a lot thinner. So it's really the tannic acid in the tea that reacts with the iron, and that's what creates the rust marks. But it's not the same kind of rust marks, the orangey ones that you get with other processes, some involving vinegar or things like that. But this one is a safer process, and the marks you get are more blackish or dark, sometimes a little purplish or bluish. And I like them better, they're more subtle. This one I'm not going to fold it because I don't want to break it. It's a lovely page. And I'm just going to place those screws on top. My tea is not too hot anymore, so that's fine. And I think I'm going to place another paper on top that's more flexible. Actually, let's wrap it in this one. Okay, that's pretty much it for this one. And what I'm thinking, because I have not folded it as much as the other ones, to get more color in between those marks, I can use the powder, the rusty powder that's at the bottom of my box here. Okay, and I have this last bit that I want to try. This is a rusty tin box that was probably run over by a car. Okay, I'm going to let all of these develop overnight because it's very late now. So usually I would let them sit for a few hours and then I would put them somewhere warm so that they can finish drying. Not fully because it's easier to unwrap them if they're still a little wet. And you can see already those marks starting to develop here. And tomorrow we'll unwrap them and take a look at all the other papers and see if we can bring them a few more finishing touches. All right, my papers have dried overnight, so let's see what we've got. I'm going to start by removing the salt here. Let's start with this one and see if it worked. So I'm just going to very gently remove the little grains of salt, and it should create some nice little marks. Yes, look, like this. What I love about these marks is that it's really not something you could create with a paintbrush, and it takes a bit of time and a natural process to evolve. So let's put it all in my cup. See how beautiful these are? I love them. It really, really looks like old aged paper now. Really nice. Not every part of each sheet of paper is going to be interesting, but I love that some bits are really intriguing, and then I can cut all of those into little pieces that I will use later in my art. Okay, that's it for the salt, and now here are my rust prints. So we're going to open them. They're mostly dry, so if it's too hard to open them, if they feel too brittle, you can always wet them a little bit again with your spray bottle. Oh, I love these. I love the circles. I love the creases that have made some different marks. And now my two little keys. So let's do this one first. Ooh, nice. I can already recognize the shape. This is super lovely. It printed really well. I love that some of them are really sharp, and like this one here, you can really recognize the key, and the other ones like here and here, they're more like ghost prints, shadow prints. All right, this is everything I've got here except my rust prints, which are still drying. And now what I want to do is just see if I can add a little extra touch to some of them and a little more of a poetic touch. So by that I mean adding some words. I've selected a few poems and texts that maybe I could add to some of them. Just a few possibilities. I've also prepared a little stamp here, alphabet stamp. And so the sentence that came to me was, "Your dreams are your wings." Because there are lots of wings in my papers, and it's really a theme that comes back for me again and again. So whatever shows up for you, then you can add that to your own custom papers. I also have my ink pads as before, and I have added a white one. It doesn't work really well, this one, but I have it, so I might as well use it. And I have my other stamps from before and some more letters and text stamps. This one is script, this one is typeface, and this one from before with the poem. So we'll see. I think here I might want to add my sentence here. So because there are wings here, so maybe I could try the white. And I can use what's left maybe on something dark here that I can spot. And now I'm feeling very tempted to use my little cards here. Can you see that the pattern is embossed into the gesso here? And so if I add something, some ink or watercolor into that, that should run through the grooves. Maybe that would be nice. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I just doodled a little bit of foliage over that one with some a regular pencil and some water-soluble pencils. And there are many, many other ways that you can customize your paper. Really, the sky's the limit, or your imagination is the limit. So let's take a look at everything we've got. I think I have a nice stash here that I can use for many months and even years to come. I have lots of them in those purplish colors because that was inspired by the color scheme of the rust prints, and I know these are colors that I'm going to use. So of course, when you do your own papers for your art, use the colors that speak to you the most, that you know you're going to use in your art. My rust prints are dry now. And I love how different they look from each other. My little library cards. They ended up very different from each other. The book page with butterfly wings. I like that it's simple and messy. I love the edges especially. The dragonfly. This one already looks almost like a journal page. There really isn't much I would add. Maybe I would glue it in my journal and write more over the blank areas. My paper doily, which has been through a lot, and it's very, very messy, but I love it. Now this one, it felt really not very exciting at first, but now I really love it. I love the layers of the printed text, the handwriting, the music. And sometimes the simpler papers like this are the most useful because I can really take some bits of it and use that whenever there's a gap in a collage or as a background. So I'm sure I'm going to use it. This darker one, I really like it. I think I'm going to use it in my journal as well. Probably some bits of the dark pattern and maybe keep this central element as a focal point for a page. I love the words Midnight Garden, so that could be a theme for a journal page. And this one is so messy, so layered, and that's what I really love about it. There are different kinds of patterns, colors, there's movement. I love the marks that the salt made and that the paper doily made. And now my two brown ones. These are so messy, but it's good to have some darker papers that can bring a lot of contrast when you need to add some to your art. And finally, my tissue paper that acted as my drop cloth instead of this one, although this one has started getting a bit messy. So after a few painting sessions, I know this will be useful too. Here I really love all the marks and the pattern. And what I love also is that it's tissue. So whenever I glue bits of it onto a journal page or a painting, then it's going to melt into the background. You're not going to see the paper really. You're just going to see those marks and the text and the flower here, just sitting on top of whatever you glue it on. What I love about these papers is that they are mine. I have made them mine with my own techniques, my own colors, with words that I found in books that touched me, and really just this time that I had having fun and making a mess. That's a whole lot of positive energy that's infused into those materials. And I know that in the future it's going to be a joy to use them. So I hope this inspired you. Make a mess, make lots of experiments. If some of them don't end up to your liking, that's not a problem, and just have fun, experiment, try things that you haven't tried before. Use the colors that you love and that reflect your mood in the moment. And then have fun using all of these yummy papers in your art. Of course, I would love to see what you create. So if you share pictures on Instagram, please use the hashtag #PaintWithLaly so that I can find you and see everything that you've created. And you can also tag me at Laly Mille. Have fun, and I hope to see you in class again soon.